Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Amy Wilson, who's here to share with us her new book, Happy to Help: Adventures of a People Pleaser. So are you the ultimate helper and just feeling overwhelmed? Well, today's guest is here to share with us how to overcome just that. Amy Wilson is an author, recipient of a Mom's Choice Gold Award, and has served as a contributing editor for Parenting Magazine. Her writings have also appeared in Redbook, Parents, and New York Family magazines, and on websites like CNN, NPR, and the New York Times. She also is an actor who starred on Broadway and appeared as a series regular on multiple network sitcoms. Amy was a performer and creator of Motherload, a solo show which toured to 16 cities nationwide after its hit-off Broadway run. Her comedy solo work was also featured at the HBO U.S. Comedy Arts Festival. So welcome to the show, Amy Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Marianne.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So what inspired you to write this?
I had been batting around some ideas about women's lives, and I was invited to consider the times that I had to pick up the slack for other people and the times when I had to pick up the slack for myself, that I really needed to have put in more effort than I had. And as I thought back over my life, no matter how hard I thought about it, I could not think of a time where I had not put in enough effort. However, I could think of many, many times when I had stayed too long, gone too far, tried too hard in the service of something that was never, ever going to work. And I realized that was what I needed to write a book about.
So when we talk about the essays that you wrote, you first start off with how women are, in many ways, we've been conditioned to be the helpers in society. What brought you to that point?
Well, I thought, knowing that this was true, I wondered if it was true about just me or every woman. And I think I have a sort of special mix of being taught this in my life. I'm the oldest of a large family, oldest of 6 kids and 25 grandchildren. So I really was a happy helper around my house every day from a pretty young age. I also went to Catholic school where we were taught a lot about service. And I had one teacher in particular that I talk about in the beginning of the book who told me I was not allowed to not raise my hand, that if I knew the answer, I must always show up and contribute. And then I was, a brownie Girl Scout, swearing a pledge at every meeting that I would help other people at all times, which is a lot to put on an 8-year-old. But, of course, there are a lot of scouts who take that pledge and don't download it as the defining principle of their life. But for some reason, I did. I don't think it's that unusual for a woman to receive all these messages and start to believe them all as her job, as I did.
It seems so common that women are just expected to do so much. And I know you did a lot of research in regards to multitasking. Can you share some of that with us?
Yes, this was a big surprise to me as I worked on the book. I thought it was settled science that women's and men's brains were different, in particular on this issue of multitasking, that women's brains were uniquely suited to doing more than one thing at a time, whereas men's were not, which is why we could handle so much more of the little things around the house. We don't mind, we're supposed to do it, and we're better at it anyway. I had participated in that. Turns out that it's a myth. When I really went back and looked at the studies, even the studies that were trumpeted in magazines and newspapers as proving that women were just better at certain things, when you really looked at the studies, they didn't prove that at all. They were inconclusive results that were sort of shunted towards that. But no, it turns out with more recent studies that women's brains are no better at doing more than one thing at a time than men's. It's just as taxing for us as everybody else. It's just that we have maybe more experience at doing it.
Because we have to.
Because we have to, right? Because that's right. Because the places that we exist within, right? Whether it's our family or our workplace or our children's schools or our communities, they're all sort of presented on this assumption that we're going to do a lot of unpaid work, that we're going to be good at it, that we're not going to complain about it because we're actually really happy while we're doing it. All of those things are presumed to be true. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not, but that assumption is always there pushing back at us.
I really don't like that, and it's it's interesting that, as I was reading through your book and it kind of I was recalling several times where people were expecting me to do things that I don't enjoy doing and I wouldn't want to do. So, I one was someone came up, we were having an event, and they wanted me to do the cooking for everyone attending, and I don't
Mm.
cook. So, So I gave it a moment of thought. It's like, well, I could do that, but you're not gonna like it,
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not good at that task, it is assumed that it's yours to think about, right? That Alison Daminger is a sociologist whose work I really admire, and she talks about the invisible workload, the things that the default parent or the default taker care of in a situation, which is usually a woman will do, and it's noticing, tracking, remembering, executing. If you're not a cook, but you are still, it is presumed, going to be the person who's going to figure out where the food is going to come from then. In my family, I'm the one, it's just tacitly presumed that I'm the one who's going to figure out who's going to take the dog when we go on vacation, something I tend to forget I'm supposed to be doing until 12 hours ahead. And really, why is it my job more than anybody else's? It's not. It's just over time, we're the ones who are going to notice and track and remember all the little things.
Now, do you think that part of it is also women are expected to be in many ways like perfectionists? And so, because we have to take care of everything, so we have to be on top of everything. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
I do have thoughts on that. I definitely grew up thinking that on top of everything else, I was a perfectionist. I had excessively high standards because that's what we're being told. This is what women tend to be told when we express any sort of dissatisfaction about, like, well, wait, why am I doing everything? Why is it assumed that I'm the one who's to decide what the food is going to be at this event? Well, it's because you take these things on. You're a workaholic. You like being busy. You need everything to be perfect. You need everything to be your way. You won't let people help you. All of these things are sort of given back to you when, at least this has happened for me throughout my life, when I've said, wait a minute, why is this happening this way? Well, it's because you secretly like it that way. And I think the perfectionist is one of those things that's often sold back to us. You're making this, as opposed to society is telling you every time you open your phone that you need to be thinner, a better parent, a better partner, eating more protein, whatever it is. These things you're not very good at are constantly sold to you. You're a perfectionist if you listen to them in any way, shape, or form, I suppose, but it's pretty hard not to when it's being sold to you all day, every day.
That we're supposed to manage everything and do everything.
Right,
For
right.
the women that are wanting to redefine their lives in many ways, what advice would you give them in regards to becoming a recovering perfectionist?
Well, I mean, I think part of it for me was rejecting that you need to recover from anything, that there's something wrong with you. If you are stressed and feel like maybe your standards sometimes are too high, or maybe other people's standards are too high, because there's a kind of perfectionism I discovered researching this book. There's the self oriented perfectionist. That's like my bangs have to be perfect or I can't leave the house, which I didn't really identify in as at all. Then there's others oriented perfectionists that your kids' rooms have to be perfect. The Christmas tree has to be redecorated 3 times because it doesn't look right. That's others oriented. And then there's societally oriented, which is that society is constantly telling you that you have to have everything right, that you have to have high standards. That's presented by the authors of that study as a fiction that the woman holds in her head as true, but which is not really true. And that's where we sort of part ways. I think that's very much true, that we're held to high standards by the society around us. And when we try to meet them, it makes us unhappy. But being a recovering perfectionist makes it sound like you have to fix something about yourself rather than reject these messages that are coming at you, which are not your fault. They're there.
Talk about mic drop, you know? I'm sure there are many women going, I quit that. I'm done.
Right, right. Like maybe society has to recover from thinking we have to handle everything, not us thinking we have to handle it. If we're being told that and take it in, and then we say, "Hey, wait a minute," and then it's like, "Well, you're the one who thinks you have to do everything." It's not helpful, and it's certainly not a sufficient solution to changing things.
I would think that hearing that would be like a marker in my road to make some massive changes.
Right, right. Okay, so in this book, I talk about, because funnily enough, I was writing a book about how I changed the narrative about being happy to help. And in order to do that, I had to change the narrative in my own house, of course, to have time to write a book. And I discovered in going through this with I have three high school and college age kids, a loving spouse, that trying to sort of reset the expectations around us, it wasn't as easy as one and done. And it wasn't because the people around me didn't love me, didn't want me to be happy, didn't want me to get a book done. It was that when I said, like, some of you have to do something, this, I can't do this all anymore. They kind of look at you like, do what? When you're a happy helper, when you've made everybody's daily lives smooth and undisturbed, and part of it is you look happy while you're doing it and you make it seem, well, it's not hard while you're doing it, because making it seem like it's not hard is another part of the assignment. Then when you say, I can't do this anymore, and the people who are around you look back at you like, what are you talking about? They're not bad people. They honestly don't know what you're talking about. And so in my family, it was a lot of resetting. No, I don't. I'm not the only one who knows how to turn on the dishwasher, because we're going to I'm going to show you right now. No, I'm not the only one who puts the pots and pans away because I like them a certain way. No, I don't. They can all get shoved into this cabinet. And going through sort of each thing and rejecting each time that it was my excessive expectations that were keeping me doing everything. It took time, but it worked. I'll tell you that it works after a while.
It's really kind of resetting those boundaries that you
Yeah,
have with everybody. And I would think that in many ways they're like rediscovering how life would work with these new, I don't want to say rules, but really kind of in many ways boundaries.
that's right. And it's about, I was trying to say to my family, I want you to notice that we're out of dog food and then go get it. I don't want it, because the first response when you try to reset expectations for people around you, they will say, well, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Not really understanding that that's still keeping you in charge of the list. There shouldn't have to be you executing and handing out jobs. There should be, we all exist in this family. The dishwasher is full, turn it on. We're out of milk, go get some. Right. And that takes longer, but it is possible. It really is. I can't believe how much the workload in my family has changed over the last couple of years since I was working on this book. And we really started to look at these things. And it did have to be me. I did have to change things. I did have to sort of demand that, but I didn't have to fix my own perfectionism first. I just had to readdress the situation and make it more equitable.
How do you think developing these set of guidelines and boundaries in your family has impacted your children as well? How's that helped them, as they grow to adults?
Well, I mean, I think the whole point of growing, kids into young adults and then who leave you is to help them feel and be sufficiently self-sufficient when they leave you, right? It shouldn't be. I discovered when my first child went to college that he had never used an ATM machine before, because of course these days you just beep and boop everything with your phone to pay for things. Once I need to go to an ATM, he had no idea how to do that. So there were weird gaps in my older kids' knowledge that only became visible as they started to leave the nest. That's okay. That doesn't make me a bad person, but it does show how much caretaking we do for the people around us that allows them to not ever have to learn how to do things like that. And that's not really the way to send your kid out into the world. So getting better at teaching them sooner, like, come here, I'm going to show you how to do this. You check in for your flight, right? You go buy your flight, things like that. I'm letting my older kids do now instead of executing perfectly and handing them a boarding pass, which is, I will admit, the way I like to do things.
Well, you make sure they all get on the plane then.
Right. They all get on the plane if I'm in charge. That's right. But then nobody knows how to do it except you. So you have to think about that.
It's 50-50 after that.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I think it just provides not only so much freedom for you, but for the family unit, completely.
Yes, exactly. And I think people realize that it is work once they actually start to do it. The things in your life that wrapping 50 Christmas presents is actually hours and hours of work and thinking about who gets what and thinking about these ones have to get wrapped first because we're seeing this family first. All of those things, the amount of that work and those spinning beach balls. I think of each of them as like a spinning beach ball in the corner of my operating system, like on your laptop screen. And I have like 10 of them at a time. And again, people don't know what you're doing for them until you make it visible. The invisible workload really is invisible to the people around us if we've been good at it. That doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them maybe disincentivized. So it does take time.
It's a little bit of an education.
Yeah.
One thing that you talked about earlier that I kind of want to touch in on, you talked about being the oldest daughter. What I understand there's an oldest daughter syndrome. Can you share that with us?
Yes, yes, or a so-called. I'm not sure it's a syndrome, but it's certainly a truth that when you're the oldest daughter of a family, and actually I talk about this in the book. So I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My mom is the oldest of 8 kids, so I'm the eldest of an eldest, and my youngest sibling is way younger than me. He was born when I was in college, and I think all of those specifics of my situation certainly intensify it. You're either an eldest daughter or you're not, but there's something about my situation that is sort of a super eldest daughter crucible. And people look to you for assistance in many, many small ways, right? So I was a fourth grader that could bathe my siblings, feed my siblings their dinner, make sure their coat was zipped when we were leaving for school. I mean, I just did those things and I liked being good at them and I knew them. But I think when you sort of download that sort of scanning the room around you for what needs to be done and who needs to be helped, when you start that work that early, I think you just very much integrate it into your sense of self. And I think maybe the eldest daughter syndrome kicks in when you get to be an older person or just an adult and you're not getting that reciprocated in your life. Sometimes I feel like, why doesn't anybody take care of me? Why doesn't anybody make sure I got exactly what I wanted for Christmas or bring me a cup of coffee just the way I like it? And I think you have to ask for those things. And we're not very good at asking for help. We're good at helping and we're good at not needing anything ourselves. That was the other sort of assignment for me, I think, as an eldest daughter, to just make sure I was completely independent once I was 18 and just get out of my parents' hair and not be any further trouble to them. And that sets in a sort of hyper independence that can also, yes, come back to bite you. But there's things about being an oldest daughter that have made me self-sufficient and independent and strong and capable that I wouldn't change for anything.
Well, I'm the oldest in my family too, and I gotta tell you, it's interesting the things I grew up learning versus the youngest, and some of the stuff she gets away with, I'm like, "How is that even possible?"
Right. 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 That you do lay the groundwork when you're the first one to go through the driver's license and the leaving for school and the staying out late with your boyfriend or whatever. Yeah, you do all that first.
Yeah, they kind of, blaze that trail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and talk about blazing trails, I wanna talk about basically, for each essay, you have these really great titles. And one's Look on the Bright Side and It's Never Too Late. So, why did you choose titles like that?
So when a woman is overwhelmed, reaches her breaking point, and asks for help or says she can't do it anymore, I think very often, at least in my life, instead of getting the help or the assistance you need, what you get back is advice. Sort of toxic positivity, sort of forms of advice, things you need to do to change your mindset instead of fixing your problem. Like, for example, look on the bright side, right? You're going through a tough time and somebody tells you to look on the bright side. Can you imagine being somebody living in California right now who has lost her home and being told by somebody to look on the bright side, at least her, family is safe and sound? That is the opposite of useful. And yet it is generally what we do to one another, I think because it makes the person saying it feel better, right? Instead of like, wow, instead of engaging with, wow, you need more help than I know how to give, I'm going to say to you, look on the bright side, and then go home and sleep soundly and leaving the overwhelmed person with no help at all. So my editor suggested to me that we actually take these different forms of advice that I really have tried to apply and misapply throughout my life and make them the titles of the essay. So most of the titles, there's an essay called Never Give Up. That's about me learning to ski as an adult and completely hating it and being terrible at it because I was so frightened. And the lesson I needed to learn eventually is sometimes giving up is exactly what you're supposed to do. But the reason it went on as long as I did is I was trying to over apply this idea you can't give up, you can't let your kids see you quit, when what I needed to do is exactly the opposite. And I think a lot of us spend a lot of time chasing advice and trying to make ourselves into a better person so things won't bother us. And that is not, I think, the answer to living the life that you seek.
No, definitely not. I mean, I really love your book. It has so much just great wisdom, but also humor. And I think that plays such a significant part in your writing. So, how does like laughter help people and readers more deeply process these personal truths?
Oh, that's a really good question. Mary Carr, who writes beautiful memoirs and also teaches about memoir, she says that if you have dark places in your book, you need humor to help your reader over the dark places. So I thought about that while I was writing this book, because some of these essays are very light and humorous and some are kind of dark. And so I tried to include humor everywhere because it does make, I think, the reader feel like this character is going to be okay. The character being me, the storyteller of the book. She's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And the other thing the humor does is when you laugh in recognition of something that's on the page, I hope that a reader is laughing because she's saying exactly that is so me, that is so my kids, that is so my life. It's laughing in a recognition that connects you, and it's a way to sort of make the reader feel seen and connected with the author that I love. And I also just love the idea of making people laugh. It's always been, I used to be a performer before I was a writer, and I loved doing live performance so much more than TV or movies because you'd get that laugh and you knew you were connecting with that audience member right then when you heard that laughter.
I think that that is a just such a great gift that people can have because I mean these topics can get a little heavy. I mean because there's so much that to put on women.
That's right. And yet I will find, this some of the stories I go through some stuff with my kids. There's stuff about the pandemic. My hard was hard, and it's specific, but it's universal. I'm discovering almost everybody I talk to, they will say to me, "Well, this reminded me of when I went through this." We all walk through really, really hard times, and in those times, I think we often think that we really can only depend on ourselves because we don't want to burden other people or because other people wouldn't understand. And I've learned through talking to so many women about this book that, in fact, those hard times are what connects us, that we're not so unusual in having gone through these things.
Well, let's talk about your podcast. I'd love to hear about it.
So I have a podcast called What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. And the title comes from Dorothy Parker, who was a humorist over 100 years ago. She used to answer the doorbell or the phone by saying, "What fresh hell is this?" Kind of a now what? And we thought it was the perfect metaphor for parenthood. Every time you come around a corner, what fresh hell is this? So my co-host, Margaret Abels, and I started the podcast in 2016. She's another comedy writer and performer and parent of 3 kids. And so we started it in 2016 to have fun. And now we're in our 9th year of producing episodes. We've talked to hundreds of authors and parenting experts ourselves. We also do our own episodes every week where we take on topics that we come up with, sometimes that listeners share with us. And it's been such a privilege to create a community of cool parents talking to one another. And with every episode, we try to be funny and we try to be useful. We try to give takeaways. And our overarching thing for each of us has always been it's not the mom's fault. We're not going to tell her you need to do this better in order for this to be easier in your life. We need to come at it from the point of view of you're doing your best. This is as hard as you think it is. Now here's some things that might work. And that sort of mindset, I think I was just able to sort of pick that up whole and drop it into the process of writing this book and apply all of those sort of principles, and I think that they've really informed one another, the book and the podcast, and it's such a thrill to get to do both.
So exciting that this all comes together in the way it does. And I love
Yeah.
how you have your perspective because, parenting is hard. It's
Yes.
very difficult. And folks that say, oh, just having kids and, the wife either stays at home, it's no big deal or what have you. I mean, they're nuts. So,
There's there's so many contradictions, that somebody just pointed this out last week on the show, that you have the contradiction of, hey, you mom are so distracted and so in your phone all the time that you're not even raising your kid properly, you're ignoring them. Also, you're completely hovering over that same kid and never leaving them alone and never letting them develop independence. How can we be telling today's parent both of those things at the same time? They're contradictory, and yet we do. And so the poor parent falls prey to trying to fix both of those things about herself, pay more attention to her kid and pay less attention to her kid at the same time. You'll make yourself crazy if you try to chase every bit of advice you receive.
is there a message? And I know there's many, but I'm going to have you choose one here. It's probably like trying to, choose a favorite child. But is there like one message or moment from Happy to Help that you hope readers and our listeners will carry with them? And then if so, why?
I think the overall message I want a reader to take away is when you have hard times in your life, which you will, they're hard because they're hard, not because you make them harder on purpose, not because there's something wrong with you. They're just hard. And sometimes in our lives, there are things that are really unfixable. And what I had to learn was to sit in the uncertainty and dwell in the unfixability and accept that, which is very painful. Instead of maybe I'll try one more thing, maybe I'll read one more article, maybe I'll call one more doctor. There must be something more I can do. You reach the limits of that sometimes in the hard times in your life. And that doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. What you have to do then is to stop and be in that moment of sitting with something hard with the people who love you, who aren't expecting you to fix every single thing, even if it feels that way sometimes. They just want to sit with you. They just want you to sit together among these things that are broken and imperfect and hard. And learning to do that really transformed my relationships as well as my expectations that I had of myself.
Yeah, it would seem that that really puts us in a place where we're I just like constant, like having information overload. It's just too much. So at some
Right.
point, you've got to stop and just take a seat.
Yes, I mean, and it's not, I'm not saying that it's never the answer. Sometimes people will come on our podcast and say, well, the moms are being Dr. Google. And I always push back on that because I've had kids who have had mysterious medical things that were wrong with them. And my research and my advocacy helped them get better sooner. So don't take that message. Again, there's another contradiction. You need to work harder for your kids, and there you go, working too hard for your kids. Don't take on those messages that there's something wrong with you when you're working hard to fix something. But on the other hand, there is a moment where you need to accept the unfixability, and that's the hardest part of all.
I would say so. Well, my goodness, Amy, you're such a just an inspiration. Where can our readers and listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about Happy to Help?
My website is amywilson.com. And from there, you can find my podcast, which is called What Fresh Hell Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. You can also find that podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search What Fresh Hell. And you can find Happy to Help linked from my website, amywilson.com, or again, wherever you buy books. And I'm on TikTok at Amy Wilson Author, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all the other places as at Amy. This is a tough one. At Amy Wilson, AMYWLSN. It's the curse of a common name. I couldn't be Amy Wilson, so I'm Amy WLSN.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Amy. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Happy to Help: Adventures of a People Pleaser. Make sure to pick up your copy of Happy to Help, which is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.